14th. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes from the October 17th, 2017 Economic Development Trust meeting.
So moved.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Please cast your votes. And it is so done. Next is to ratify the OCEDT claims.
I'd like to move approval.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? Please cast your votes. And it is so done. If anyone in the audience, by the way, would like to be heard at this meeting, outside in the lobby there are sign-up sheets. If you would fill out the sign-up sheet and see that our city clerk gets it, you will be called on at the appropriate time. So thank you very much for your consideration in that. Now, items for individual consideration. Who's handling A? Are you handling A, Brent? Eric. Oh, here he comes. Eric Winger. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item on your agenda is item A. It is a final plan and specification to be advertised for bids for the Phase 2 Bricktown infrastructure improvements. This is a next phase of the Bricktown improvements, and so the engineer is Cabanis Engineering. The estimated construction cost is $730,000. The work on Phase 1, and you might recall some of this work, this is in the Bricktown area that was identified as some sidewalk improvements, some ADA enhancements. It helped repair some of the irrigation systems, some of the landscaping. This really extends on that work that was completed in 2015 and does additional sidewalk and paver repairs. Probably the biggest thing that happens in this phase is the inoperable lifts to take you from the upper canal to the lower canal are going to be replaced with ramps. It'll eliminate the need for future maintenance and some of the difficulties that we've had with the elevator systems. It also does some additional lighting and some additional irrigation. With your approval today, this will be advertised for bids. Work could begin as early as January 2018 and be finished in the spring, early summer.
Second.
We have a motion to approve in a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And it is approved. Next item, item B, amendment number 3, change order number 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Amendment 3, Change Order 4 for $508,493.77. This is for Project 180, Package 6B, and this is the work that's related to the streetscaping of Gaylord between Reno and Sheridan. The biggest item on this, which is about $422,000 of the change order, there was work with the amenity zone, and you recall the amenity zone is the area behind the curb. It's the pavers, it's the tree wells, it's the trees, it's part of the sidewalk and some of the enhancements. It was originally part of the hub project, and so this change order, because of the convenience of the 180 contractor being in front of the hub, is being moved. It's deducted from the hub, and it's being added to this contract so that it will have a consistent appearance with the rest of Gaylord. So of the $508,422 of that is just in that one scope of work change. The rest of the items are just some general roadway changes, some irrigation changes, some signal changes. This project is proceeding very quickly. We're looking for some additional lane openings in December with a complete project completion in January of 2018.
Move approval.
Is that January 2018? Just in about 2 months?
Yes.
And this will be completed?
Yes. So the project on Gaylord is progressed to where the work in front of the hub, the 2 lanes that are currently northbound, but they're being operated as one north and one south, that is all complete. The only work remaining is the 2 westerly lanes that are closest to the Cox Convention Center. They're under construction now, and curb and gutter is going in. There is some streetcar work that's occurring also that area is a part of MAPS 3, so it's coordinated. But yes, the Gaylord portion, all 4 lanes completed in January, but we'll actually have a portion of the additional lanes open in December, in time for the hub grand opening, which is on December the 7th.
And so by the end of January, all the lanes in that area should be, quote, open, unquote, for traffic?
Barring any very bad winter weather, yes.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
We had a motion and a second. Any comments or questions?
Nice hedge on the weather.
Yeah, thank you.
That's the standard.
It's pretty nice today, so, yeah.
I thought I pinned him down as far as he would go, Jim. Please cast your votes. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
And it is so ordered. Item C, joint development agreement between City of Oklahoma City and the Midtown Redevelopment Corporation. Brent Bryan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is an agreement to which the trust will provide a little over $91,000 to the association to fund public improvements at the Red Andrews Park. This is being funded through three different sources. One, through TIF. $400,000 of TIF was allocated by the City Council a few months back, or a while back, and of that, over $300,000 of it was competitively bid. And so what we're doing here is we're getting authorization to provide over $90,000 to the for-profit entity to finish out the project. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'll second, but I do have a question if I could.
Go right ahead, Jim.
Is the plan as it's before us and funded today similar to the plan that we saw months ago for its redevelopment?
Yes. And Brian Fitzsimmons, the architect, is here if you have any detailed questions that you'd like to ask.
Any questions of the architect? We had a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And it is so done. Item D, joint economic agreement between the city and Two Yet Many LLC.
Yes, sir. This is an economic development agreement for the development of a clinic at 1700 Northeast 23rd Street. There's 18,000 square feet there. We'll be providing $1.3 million to this project. $700,000 will be provided as an incentive payment, and $600,000 will be provided as a loan, a forgivable loan, a 20-year forgivable loan, in which, as long as the developer meets certain performance measures, the loan will burn off at 5% a year for 20 years. In addition to that, this project has performance benchmarks in it, in which if the developer attains a certain return, or if they decide to sell the property and attain a certain return, they will provide some of the proceeds back to us as a way to help us recover our funds on this project.
This project has some nuances that we don't usually do in projects like this. Is that a true statement?
Yes, sir, that is true.
And we're doing them because?
We're doing this. This is a very difficult project to get financing. This is a very difficult project. There's not any comps in the area, and so the developer went at great lengths to find financing for this project, and after months and months and months, was able to attain financing along with support from the private sector to make this project work.
Thank you, sir.
I'll offer a motion to approve the item.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
Second, any comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And the item is approved. Next up, dealing with the issuing of tax increment revenue bonds.
Yes, sir. This is the Tax Increment Financing District Number 2. We're seeking authorization to issue up to $75 million in taxable bonds to do multiple things. We have two outstanding loans right now. We have a line of credit that has a principal amount of up to $25 million. And then we have a note that we did back in 2008 with J.P. Morgan that we wish to pay off and refund. So in addition to that, this will allow us to utilize the low interest rate terms that we have right now that are in the market, and it will also provide financing for some of our projects that include something like the infrastructure project that you previously approved. A significant amount, over $10 million, would go to I-89 to support the projects that the City Council has allocated to them, in addition to Metro Tech and other projects, including the Red Andrews project. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir.
Move approval.
With a motion to approve. And a second. Any questions? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And it is approved. Next up, we have a resolution between the City of Oklahoma City and the Economic Development Trust approving allocation of general obligation limited tax proceeds to the American Tissue Industries, LLC.
Yeah, I would like to introduce Tom Morsch, who's here, Dorsch, sorry. I know another Tom Morsch that works for PFM. This afternoon to make a brief presentation about this project. They are proposing to add 84 new jobs to Oklahoma City with an average first-year wage of about $47,000. As the resolution mentions, we're looking at a gold allocation of about $125,000.
Very good, thank you. Appreciate the time. I'm actually an employee of Solaris Paper, just so that's clear for you here. We purchased American Tissue Industries in October, which is the legal entity that you'll see described in the resolution. And we will function in Oklahoma City as American Tissue Industries, but as a wholly owned LLC under Solaris Paper. So I'm going to introduce Solaris Paper to you just briefly and tell you what we do and what we're about and why we're excited about this project. So we are a privately held corporation. We've been in existence about 10 years in the U.S. Our headquarters is in Santa Fe Springs, California, which is just near Anaheim. We've got about 500 full-time employees across the United States, and in 2016 we had about $200 million in sales. 2017 we're on track for a compound growth of somewhere between 15 and 18% on top of that. So we are definitely growing. We've got very good traction with our customers, and we're very excited about our growth plans, and the Oklahoma City plant here is the key to our strategy for the next couple of years. So I did want to mention, there's lots of data here, but I did want to tell you that we are in 3 different markets. So we are in the retail side of the business, so you can find our products at Winco, for example. We sell a branded product. I'll share that in a moment. We do private label business as well. So if you were to go to a Walgreens anywhere in the United States and buy Walgreens branded facial tissue, that's a product that we make for them. We also have our away-from-home business, which is our institutional type of customers, and we've got several different markets that we're in that family as well. So we're primarily bath tissue, toilet paper, paper towels, and facial. We've got some other formats we have on a smaller scale. So this is just some photos of some of the products we make. The Fiora is our branded retail product. It does very well in Southern California. It's doing very, very well in Texas and Oklahoma, which is part of why we're here. So we're going to feel our growth in that market. And you can see some of our away-from-home or institutional type of products. In the institutional side of the business, we're very much of a high-end player in this. Harvard University, for example, uses our products, so I'm pretty proud of that. I couldn't get into Harvard, but my toilet paper can. So That's right. So anyway, so just so you can see some customers in this particular region, I'm sure some of these names look familiar to you. We've got a lot of business with Family Dollar right now, and we're trying to grow in that market with them, Aldi, Winco. And you see in the bottom couple of rows there, you see some of our institutional distributors that we've got good relationships with. A lot of these folks are in Texas and Oklahoma. Just so you understand what we're doing here, we are going to be occupying the old Clearwater facility at OKC Works on North Council Road. We will be doing very similar type of activities to what they did. So we will be bringing in parent rolls, we will be converting it, and then shipping out a finished product on a pallet that would go to a customer's distribution center, for example. So we're not bringing in a pulp operation or a tissue machine, which is going to be loud and smelly and et cetera. This is from the street. You won't even be able to tell what we're doing if you didn't see our sign on the building. So it's a very similar business. In fact, we have acquired one of the existing assets, and we're in the process of starting it up now. We will be bringing some additional assets in later next year to improve our throughput and productivity of that site. Just so you know where our footprint, we've got a West Coast operations, I mentioned Santa Fe Springs. We've got an East Coast plant, which is Strasburg, which is Northern Virginia. And for us, as you can look at a map and see, we had a giant hole in our footprint, and by golly, Oklahoma City fit that very nicely. So it helps us quite a bit with distribution, particularly, again, to Texas. Texas is our second largest market, if you look at it by state. And we right now, servicing Texas at a very severe distribution penalty. we're going to be able to fix that with our startup here. As mentioned, we're moving into the OKC Works facility. We're taking over the exact same footprint Clearwater had, so it's 2 buildings, about 470,000 square feet. The west building, the 325,000, will be where our production facility is, and we'll be using the smaller building as a warehouse, again, very similar to what Clearwater did. We did look, about a year ago, we were given the assignment to build this plant. We looked at several different locations. We knew this part of the country was where we wanted to be. We looked at facilities in northwest Louisiana, northern Texas, and kind of stumbled across this opportunity here in Oklahoma City, and it's turned out for us to be really good opportunity, and we're very excited to leverage this. I know we worked quite a bit with Jeff and the group here on the incentive piece, and again, while we're happy to be here, this did help us sort of tip the scale, because we are at a slight distribution penalty here on the inbound side. So we bring in our parent rolls, it either comes from the West Coast or it comes from the Northeast, and about the most expensive place you can ship that is here. We've got some long-term plans to fix that, and we will be addressing that. But this was a good opportunity for us to get going early, help service our customers in this part of the country, and then work through our long-term cost structure as another project going forward. Quickly, we've got shown 2 phases here. The first phase is what I've got currently funded, which is a $25 million project. Bring 2 new lines in. They will be installed next November. I don't have weather as an excuse. The building's done, but plan is to have them installed next November and start production Q1 of 2019. And I did mention they did leave an existing asset, and we're in the process of commissioning that right now. Phase 2, which is showing out in 2020, 2021, would be the addition of a 3rd line. Right now, there's a chance that may in fact grow, and I'll be working on that funding package even next year, and that would be another $8 to $10 million investment, $12 million investment in total in the facility and equipment, and another 20 to 25 new jobs with that line. So, as was previously mentioned in the introduction, we're looking by the end of next year, we will be at approximately 61 employees, and with the 5-year plan, with the addition of the 3rd line, we'll be at 84 roughly is where we believe we'll be. And these are really higher tech jobs. You think bath tissue, you don't necessarily think high tech, right? But the equipment in order to make this is really actually quite sophisticated and runs very, very fast. We run about web speed is somewhere around 2,000 feet per minute, which is, if you can imagine making toilet paper that fast, it's pretty remarkable. And so anyway, these are good jobs, sophisticated jobs, and we're excited here. We do believe we'll be able to rehire some of the former Clearwater employees. It was another selling point for us coming here. Some folks with experience in the industry and that plant site, we believe there's some substantial value in bringing some of those folks back, and we plan to do so. In fact, we've already done that with a couple. I am proud of our company. We're not just here to make toilet paper. We do engage with the community, and very happy about how we've done this in other places in California and Northern Virginia. We like to be a part of the community. We think it's good and important for us. And not just we like to be involved with the community, but we also enjoy really representing how we can bring kind of a green spin or a green side to an industry that's not always well respected, right? We've got some initiatives and some programs where we make bath tissue from some of the most advanced and sophisticated fibers on the planet, which got a high cycle rate and really breakthrough technology in some of the things we do, and reduces our carbon footprint. So we're very, very proud of that too. So we holistically look at how we impact the community, and we're very proud of our record so far. I think that's it.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Questions?
Tom, you said that Asia and North America were your primary fiber sources, according to your PowerPoint. Where in North America?
So our base paper, called parent rolls, come in. We've got 2 primary suppliers. One is in Maine. They actually have it's St. Croix Tissue. They've got a plant on the Canadian-Maine border. And our other supplier would be Asia Pulp and Paper, and they would be servicing parent rolls through the Port of Long Beach. They would harvest that in Indonesia and import to Long Beach and bring them here. So you can imagine bringing parent roles from Indonesia or from Maine to Oklahoma City.
That's the expense.
That's one of our logistical and cost challenges we'll be addressing. And we've got some ideas on how we'll do that.
So is Fiora one ply or two?
We've got, in fact, both. Great question. So we do sell a single ply format. We've got the bath tissue is a 2-ply, and kitchen towel used to be 3-ply. We just released it as a 2-ply product. So great question.
Any other questions or comments?
I'd like to move approval.
We have a motion to approve. Second. Seeing no comments, please cast your votes. And is approved. Thank you and welcome to Oklahoma City, sir.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have a joint agreement between the City of Oklahoma City and Niagara Bottling LLC.
You guys have already seen a presentation about this project. So this is the Niagara Bottling project. This is the economic development agreement, 45 new jobs, average wage of about $44,000. And this agreement is like all of the others that we do. It's pay for performance with the same kind of accountability standards that is our standard practice.
In the past, Kathy, some people have questioned whether the only thing we're here for is to help the real big companies. The company we just talked about, 84 jobs, and now this one has how many?
45.
45. We're in a whole different market here.
Right. Yeah, and both of these are manufacturing type jobs. I mean, both of these projects are related to manufacturing and distribution of a final product once it's palletized and ready to be shipped. So, I think these are really good examples of some smaller projects that we do for jobs that you don't have to be an aerospace engineer to qualify for and help a big part of our economy.
And they fit that model of a primary job that
Yes.
we set when we set up the GOLD program.
Absolutely. Yep.
Questions or comments from the trustees? We have a motion to approve?
I'll second, but just a question if I could. So the previous one had more jobs, similar pay per job, and a smaller gold. I appreciated on page 2, there's quite a list as to how the SAP determines that value. I wonder if you wanted to speak to that so that no one's confused as to why what company gets what amount.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is based upon the amount of capital investment that they make and what their ramp up is. So in the American Tissue Industries one, their capital investment was $37 million, and in this one it's $57 million. So I think that's the primary difference between the two projects.
And why are we concerned and why are we happy when they invest more for?
Well, I think, the driver of that is that these bonds are paid for through property taxes, so we tie the level of investment to the amount of incentive that they get because of that level of capital investment and the property taxes that they therefore generate eventually from these projects.
We have a motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Please cast your votes, and it is approved. Next, we have, did I miss one? Oh, yeah, SkyWest Airlines.
H is
H, mobile, two. Oh, yeah.
Mobile medical
examination services.
Again, this one is an economic development agreement. You've already had a presentation about this one. This one is quite a few additional jobs. It's 400 jobs. The average salary is $34,000. A very limited capital investment and a $500,000 allocation based upon the number of jobs that are created.
Thank you, ma'am.
I recall it's a unique product offering, really, I think, what they do, and hopefully helps existing businesses find some cost savings as well, maybe, hopefully,
Yeah.
locally. But I would move the item.
We have a motion to move it. And do we have a second?
Second, and I have a comment.
Go right ahead, ma'am.
Councilman McAtee and I attended their ribbon cutting, and it's quite a facility, and they have several people already on staff, and they're very motivated and very enthusiastic. So we met the ownership, group out of Santa Ana, and they feel very partial to Oklahoma. So just my 2 cents.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And it is approved. Next up, now we'll get to SkyWest Airlines.
So this is the economic development agreement with SkyWest Airlines. This is an aircraft maintenance facility for SkyWest, 375 jobs, average wage of a little bit over $56,000 a year, capital investment of over $29 million. So great addition to the Will Rogers World Airport area and into our aviation industry.
This is a key component, isn't it, of the Lariat Landing approach out there for the eastern part of the airport. It provides primary jobs in the aerospace industry.
Right. I mean, some of Lariat Landing was designated to have runway access. So this kind of job creation project, this kind of company requires that kind of access to the runways. So it really fits well with the overall plans for Lariat Landing.
And those citizens who drive down I-44 toward Chickasha and have been wondering what those bright lights are along the eastern part of Will Rogers Airport, that's getting ready for companies like SkyWest. So just hang in there. It's going to be a very vibrant center for manufacturing and wealth creation in Oklahoma City. Any comments or questions after that shameless commercial? A motion is second. Please cast your votes. And SkyWest is approved. Okay. Next up, we are ready for the resolution on the revised policy for investment of funds. Are you handling that, Mr. Brown?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. These next two items, city staff has taken some amendments to the investment policy, and then the second one is the debt management policy. And as a trust, we try to just piggyback along and follow along with the policies that the council has approved. The first one here regarding the investment policy, it adds the Federal Home Loan Bank letters of credits as instruments of ensuring bank balances. And what we mean is when we deposit our city funds into a bank, the bank is required to collateralize our funds with something. And some type of instruments, and this is just expanding what they can collateralize with. Our assistant finance director is here. If you have any questions, and if you want more detail, he's the subject matter expert. So,
What is the desire of the trustees? We have is that ready, a motion? Okay, we have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. Anybody want further detail? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And it is approved. Next up, the amended debt management policy.
yes, sir. This amendment allows for the city to utilize a pool of underwriters to help us get to the market at a quicker pace instead of going through the RFP process. And this was this is why they amended the debt policy to allow for that.
Mr. Chairman, can you share with us the process for determining the pool?
I will have Kenny Soodle come up here and answer that question.
Good question.
Hi, Kenton Soodle, Assistant Finance Director. So council approved this amendment, and the RFP process that the trust has used for many years will still be available. This just adds this pool process, and so the city actually has a request for qualifications that was issued back on the 7th. It's due on the 22nd of this month, and we're basically asking the different investment banks, the underwriters, to submit their qualifications. It's typically the same information that we ask for in an RFP. You know, they're going to tell us about their experience, their capital position, their distribution network, who's working for them and that will be assigned to us, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll be forming a committee just like we do with our RFP process and coming back to council with a recommendation on who we think should be in that pool. It's something that we kind of do this process on the investment side with the folks that we purchase investments from. We've done that for many years through the city treasurer's office, and so it'll be a similar process that we'll be able to update that if we have, mergers and acquisitions or changes in that industry, or if council decides, someone desires to make a change there. And in addition, we'll be periodically reviewing that every 5 years, no matter what, just to look at who all's in the pool, probably do an offering every 5 years and bring that back to council. So again, this just adds an additional that ability in the debt policy. If the trust had a bond issue that you desire to just go do a separate request for proposals, that will be allowable as well. This just, as Brent stated, will allow you to piggyback on the city's pool once that's established.
Sometimes the RFP process for these professional services allows some more hungry providers to get aggressive with pricing. Do you anticipate that upon using this pool, you would select someone, you would still pursue negotiated pricing?
Yes, and it's a great question. I failed to kind of tell you the rest of the story. So once we have a pool established, what the process will be is when we have a bond issue, staff will still issue what we call a mini RFP. So it will be asking more of the things that are specific to that bond issue. What is your experience with these exact types of bond issues? And part of that will be what's your proposal on pricing, what's your underwriter fees, and that will certainly be taken into consideration. And we'll have a committee formed as well, just like we do in the RFP process. So again, at the end of the day, we're asking the same questions, just in two different processes, and hopefully this way, a normal RFP process takes 6 to 8 weeks to get it issued, get responses, form a committee, bring it back. Hopefully this way, when we do the mini process, we'll be able to kind of move more quickly. So for example, if we're trying to do a refunding or refinancing and we think the market's moving, we can get in the market a little quicker and speed up the time.
Sure. Any further questions? We have a motion to approve. And a second. Please cast your votes. And it is so approved. The Economic Development Trust regular meeting schedule.
Now, in your packet today is an item to approve the meeting schedule for next year. Generally, our meeting schedule will stay the same. We'll meet on Tuesdays at 2 o'clock, once a month, usually the third or fourth Tuesday. So the actual dates are attached to the item.
Okay, I was informed by the clerk that then we need a vote on this also. So questions or comments or action?
I'd like to move approval, and I appreciate that they're all at the same time, because when we shifted the times, it was a little confusing. 1:30.
Does that mean it starts at 2:02?
No, that's
I can be on time?
1:59 for you.
It starts when Mickey's little hand is on the 2.
The thought was I should say it before someone beats me to it.
Do we have a motion? I move. We have a motion as long as we leave it at the same time. And was there a second then? Second? Okay. Please cast your votes. And it is so approved. Okay, next up, the Alliance for Economic Development report.
In your packet is our first quarter report for the period from July to September of this year, along with our financials. Probably the most significant thing that we've been working on last quarter and continues into this quarter is the convention center and the convention center hotel. City Council approved the redevelopment agreement with Omni in July. So since then, in the months after July, we've been working to implement that agreement, working on implementing the funding plan, and the actual implementation of the hotel, getting the site ready, working with Omni, beginning design discussions. All of those things are underway. We've also continued to work on how and where to provide parking to serve the convention center, the park, the hotel, the arena, all the amenities in the North Quarter Shore area. So we've continued to have discussions with OG&E about their property at Southwest 4th and Broadway, and hope to be able to reach a conclusion on that very soon. Other areas, we obviously have been working a lot with the Chamber on job creation projects. I think Jeff will probably talk to you more about that, but we've had a very busy last few months with lots of different projects to look at and talk about. On the redevelopment and revitalization area, projects like Page Woodson are complete now. People are moving in. The commercial space, the auditorium is complete. We recently completed the installation of all the sound equipment and lighting equipment, so that facility is available to rent. We're very involved in the 1700 Northeast 23rd Street project that you all approved the TIF allocation for today. We've been working recently with the Oklahoma City Public Schools on the redevelopment of some surplus school properties and helping them figure out a process for that where we may actually manage the redevelopment of those buildings for them through the Oklahoma City Redevelopment Authority. So they can focus on educating children and we can do redevelopment, which is what we're charged to do by the City Council. One of the other areas where we've been very active in the last quarter and continue to be is the Innovation District. The Brookings study came out in April or so, and since then we've been working to resolve governance issues about how the Innovation District would be governed in the future, going through the process of getting ready for an executive search, which is now underway, to hire an executive director for the Innovation District. We also have developed a scope for a land use and development plan for the area, working with the state of Oklahoma, the Capital Medical Zoning District, the stakeholders, the major stakeholders in the Innovation District, the University of Oklahoma, Presbyterian Health Foundation, the state, us, all working together to develop a scope of work, and that's out on the street right now. To try to get land use plan completed. So we've been very busy on lots of different projects and it hasn't slowed down much. In fact, it's picking up a little bit. That's about all.
Questions for Kathy?
A couple questions, Kathy. Thank you always for the high level of activity that's continuing. Does the Innovation District have a geographic boundary, and if so, can you remind us of that?
It does. We established a boundary so that we had an area from which we could gather data, so that we could get some statistics about demographics and the numbers of jobs. So the area that was identified was basically Lottie on the east to Broadway on the west. That we included Automobile Alley. It goes to Northeast 13th Street, but kind of jogs up to include OMRF and some of the other research institutions that are north of 13th Street. And then it goes down south of 4th Street to the railroad right-of-way that runs along the south of the health center area. So that's basically the geography. When we talk about the land use study, we're really focused on the area east of I-235. We've had plenty of plans and studies done on Automobile Alley, and it's kind of working on its own at this point, but we do have some things we need to figure out east of I-235.
And I was on Northeast 4th a week or so ago, and it looks to be a lot of cleared area that I didn't recall seeing before. Is that urban renewal doing that? Is that private effort doing that? Do you know? There seems to be a lot more open space.
On the north side of 4th Street would be Page Woodson and that development. So some of the future phases of Page Woodson are in that area. But we haven't been doing any additional clearing. I mean, obviously Urban Renewal owns a great deal of property in that area on the north side of 4th Street. We only own one lot south of 4th Street. And we cleared our property years ago.
Right. Well, it's nice to see that level of activity happening. I know the JFK neighborhood nearby there with, I think it's Northeast Christian Church, Martin Luther King, that's been doing a lot of home development in that area for years, so it's nice to see kind of that all coming together.
Yeah, we have a lot of single-family homes under construction in the area. This is just kind of an interesting aside. Some of that area is in the John Rex Elementary School attendance boundary, so we've had a lot of young couples interested in buying lots and building homes in the area. So it really kind of an interesting new development for us.
One more question on something you mentioned, please. Working with Oklahoma City Public Schools on some of their older space, is the thought that they would still own in fee simple and have it developed? Or are you helping them navigate through surplus property process for public entities?
It's properties that they've declared surplus that will help them navigate through the redevelopment process so they can sell the property in the end. If some of it's not worth very much, I do want to couch that with.
Sure. Well, thank you for lending that level of expertise, because that will be very helpful.
We're excited about it.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions or comments? Can I have a motion to receive? We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And the report is received. Next up is the Economic Development Foundation report.
Well, good afternoon, members of the Trust. Before I get started on my formal comments, well, first an introduction. I'm Jeff Seymour, Director of Business Development with the Chamber. I'm standing in for Kurt today, who couldn't be here. So if you have questions, feel free to ask me as we're going through this or afterwards, and we'll just kind of chip away at the presentation. The other quick comment I wanted to make first was just a thank you for the partnership, both from the Trust and from the city, and also from the Alliance. The comment is frequently made with our efforts that it's difficult to understand where the city stops and the Chamber begins. And I think that's a good representation of our relationship, that we work very seamlessly for economic development efforts as a whole. On my comments today, I'm going to kind of do this in 3 layers. One is to give you an update on our recently completed BR&E report that talks about our survey of existing businesses and the existing economic environment. Next, I'll do a quick touch on overall activity in our project pipeline. I think that kind of tags into Kathy's comments. And then I'll finish with just a quick summary statement about the quarterly report we just submitted. So if you don't mind, we'll start with the BR&E report. So as you know and you've seen before, one of our annual activities at the Chamber is to do a survey of existing businesses and determine trends that will help us craft our overall efforts to support business as a whole in the community. This year we surveyed approximately 150 businesses. I think the total number was 149. That represented almost 35,000 employees in the market. The businesses surveyed represented a variety of different types and sizes of businesses. Represented a good cross-section of the community, and the predominant 2 sectors that we surveyed were the service industry and the manufacturing sector, and that you may see how they reacted as part of our overall response. To give you some kind of pointed results of our BR&E efforts over the past year, of the companies that we worked with and formally surveyed, 42 had reported job growth that we were able to directly record assistance efforts with, created about 1,047 jobs, an average salary a little over $46,000, and about $32 million in CapEx, which is a good year for us. Slide. Some of the other trends about the businesses that we surveyed, I'm going to kind of walk through this, and these are mostly at the macro level. Of the businesses we surveyed, about 60% are owned and headquartered here in Oklahoma. About 38% are owned somewhere else in the nation, and 3% are owned internationally. Also have a very high predominance of privately held companies, which is probably not a huge surprise. So 57% of our companies that we surveyed this year were privately held, 16% were family businesses, and the remainder were public entities. A few other quick facts. These are kind of just interesting little stats to pull out. 86% of those businesses have retained the same ownership structure that they've had the past 5 years, which is interesting. 58%, which I think this is an exciting statistic, are self-describing as being in an industry that's growing, or the product or service they provide is growing or in a life cycle phase that is, quote, on the up. 59% of those businesses are also headquartered here in Oklahoma City. Anecdotally, I think we can all agree that headquartered businesses in Oklahoma City bring other merits to the economic development equation. Think about the contributions that companies headquartered here give philanthropically, or relationships with existing education providers, things like that. So we thought that was kind of interesting. Go One of the other things that we do in this report every year is try to forecast growth opportunities. And we did that this year with a third-party source, IMSI, who helps us look 3 years out and identify particular growth patterns that might influence our market. I'm going to pull out a couple of those to highlight this afternoon. The first is corporate growth, just corporate headquarters, regional headquarters, and regional surface operations. We're projecting additional growth there. I think the number is 11% over the next 3 years. We also see a continued uptick in warehousing and logistics opportunities. I think you saw that in the projects that we've talked about here today and how warehousing plays in their corporate decisions. And we also see an uptick in healthcare offerings. One thing we did want to note is we omitted a discussion about oil and gas industry just because it's such a fluctuating and sometimes cyclical industry. We felt reticent to predict exactly what that industry would do. So I just want to make that note. I'd also make a couple quick notes about the businesses that we surveyed and their view on employment. So this is a slide that talks about the past 3 years of employment within those companies. The good news is, even though we've seen a little bit of shakiness maybe the last couple of years, of those businesses that we touched, only 2% reported losing jobs, which I think is a great statistic. Most have reported staying the same or growth. We also saw some really consistent messaging, and I think this is probably messaging you've seen for the past few years about the satisfaction levels with the investments that we've made in the community in certain key areas. So overall, really high satisfaction with the quality of life in public infrastructure, particularly water and sewer and wastewater, and then also high satisfaction rates with the business climate, community leadership, and then the cost of living. We did see also some very consistent trends in areas that the business community has dissatisfaction with. Many of these have sparked other public conversations that I think we're involved in probably multiple different ways, including some chamber action. And those included local roads and infrastructure, public transportation, and then, of course, K through 12. So again, these are areas I think we're all working to address, but we wanted to highlight that. So does anybody have any questions on the BR&E report before I move on?
I would just ask on the previous satisfaction questions, are these pre-printed response options for them, or are they writing in areas of concern?
I don't have a good answer for that, Jim. I'm sorry. I believe it's a selected menu, but I can get some clarity and provide that back to you.
So when, for example, under dissatisfied, 15% identified personal income tax as a reason to be dissatisfied.
Yeah, I mean, I think what that really is the negative response, 15% satisfied with personal income tax.
So 85% are happy with personal income tax.
I think it's the opposite. I'd say that 17%, yeah, well, the flip-flop, yeah. That actually you're saying that there's a satisfaction level of only 15% saying they are satisfied with that. So, yeah, kind of the reverse.
So embedded within that maybe they think it shouldn't have been adjusted down when the state is having a budget crisis.
I think we're wandering into political territory. But
I'm curious to know, like, is this a checkbox here, or is this a chance? Because what are we to do with this, I guess, is the point. What are you to do with this that it matters?
I think there's certain things, let's be candid here for a second. I think there are certain things that we can talk about here at the local level that we work hard to address. We talk about public infrastructure. We talk about the recent gold bond. We talk about maps, things that we've been able to really work on and chip away at. And there's certainly things here that are very much at a macro level, state level, or even higher that sometimes we may not have as much influence over. So one of the keys with this report is it gives us an opportunity to understand where we're going in particular directions at the local level. So one of the things that I didn't actually pull out of this slide is an overall maybe dissatisfaction with local workforce availability. And so that's changed the way we handle some of our existing industry efforts at the Chamber, where we're very much more tangentially focused now on talent recruitment and talent development. So I think what this really highlights is there's certain things I think we all need to keep front of mind for us at the local level, and some of those that we probably need to have continuous conversations with state and local officials about the needs to continue to make sure that our business climate makes sense in the long term.
there's not a city proposal. There was a petition that's been circulated, and it's being reviewed by the city clerk at this time to see if it got enough signatures.
Yeah, it's more of a registered report.
And Jeff, to follow up, a lot of these responses are actually met, they have meetings one-on-one with the companies. So some of this may be interviewed, some of them may be in a survey. I don't know what methodology you use, but.
As I understand it, it's kind of a mixture of both. Yeah, we do collect data and information as we meet one-on-one with the companies, and then we also conduct a formal survey to get kind of overall just response information, try to gather some, sometimes things that people would share when they were not sitting across the table from you. Sure. So I also wanted to give a quick snapshot about our pipeline. As Kathy mentioned, we have a very, very active pipeline right now. We've held at a high water mark of about 50 projects throughout the year, and I'll show you a slide at the end of that talks, this presentation that talks about that. So right now, at the end of October, we had 55 active projects. About 29 of those, roughly 29, were manufacturing projects. Some of those small companies like the ones we've dealt with here today, and some of those existing companies looking at expansion. So we think that's a good overall trend for us. If you summed up all the active projects we had, you can see the stats, but it'd be net new job growth of about 15,000 jobs, which we all know that's not going to fully materialize. We just want to kind of give you that summary slide to talk about potential impacts. This slide shows you just historically where we're at with project leads for the past 4 or 5 years. Go to the next one. Also wanted to show you projects by source. One of the things that we're really proud of as a recruitment team is that sourcing of projects is coming a lot more now from direct lead sources. So we're seeing leads come directly from the company and directly from site selectors. We certainly love our partnership with the state, but we want to have front door relationships with folks that are bringing us leads, and I think you can see that this slide articulates our ability to generate those leads ourselves. And then also project pipeline length of time. We've obviously seen here some projects that have taken years to materialize. McLaren Plastics being a great example, took 2 years to come to fruition. But this slide, I think, shows that we have a very young and active pipeline, which also I think means that we're trying to keep it, the pipeline fresh, and we're trying to keep it clean and make sure we don't have things that need to be just lingering there, lingering. So that's what this slide indicates. And then I think the last slide we have here is really just a discussion about the overall types. I wanted to show you kind of what we're seeing. Obviously, manufacturing far and away is the biggest sector of opportunity right now, followed by office. You kind of lump shared services, office, and then call center all into one category. It's probably number 2, and then some unique opportunities within aerospace, R&D, and medical. So those are my comments on the pipeline. I don't know if we had any questions on that.
Jeff, as it relates to the pipeline timeframe,
Yeah.
are you seeing that a lot of prospects are doing their own due diligence before they become obvious?
Yes, we are seeing the life cycle of a project shrink considerably. When someone comes to us, they've usually done quite a bit of due diligence, and Kathy can probably comment on this as well, but we're seeing that they've already done their homework. They've narrowed down to a group of cities by being able to find statistics and data online, and even sometimes real estate, and then coming to us and saying, hey, we're down to a couple final cities. You need to help us figure out which makes the most sense. I also want to make a few comments real quick about our quarterly report. Again, I'm standing in here for Kurt on this. I think you probably have copies of the report in your binder. I'm not going to go through all this. What I'll probably do is just jump back honestly to the final summary slide that just talks about net results for the year. As you can see, a little bit slower year, I think, than we overall wanted. Net new job growth probably won't quite hit our annual target. Not to give any sort of excuse, but I will say that some of this is due to a revamping locally or internally on how we handle recruitment versus existing business growth. We had a pretty significant revamp of our local strategy, lost 2 staff, and are in the process of rehiring that entire department. So some of the one-on-one contact we normally would have had with companies has had to kind of wait a little bit this year. So we've been heavy on the recruitment side, which is great, but maybe a little bit slow on the BRE side. And I think that trickles down to capital investment and to just overall net impact. If you look at other pieces, you can see we're having continued strong net relationships with site consulting community. You can see that on the lead generation side. Retail looks good for the year, making sure that we're trying to stay in front of the people that are corporate site decision makers and trying to make sure that the marketing message is out there. So I'd be happy to answer the questions I can on that report. If not, I may have to go back and gin up some other responses and bring them back to you at some point.
I think we're good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up, what we've all been waiting for, I guess, or not? Oh, yeah. I need a motion and a second to receive the report.
So move.
Second. Okay. Any discussion? Please cast your votes. And the report is received. Thank you, ma'am. Now we're ready for the featured time, I believe. Mr. Craig Freeman, and when we're going to see the Indian Cultural Center.
Thank you. I'm Craig Freeman, the Finance Director for the city, and I'm coming before you today to talk a little about the American Indian Cultural Center, and the reason is that the council has requested that the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust take a role of providing for the management of the contract that will be established for operations of the American Indian Cultural Center, similar to what we have with the Myriad Gardens Foundation, because we have the governance structure and the management structure in place to manage the contract, and it has a relationship to economic development. And so we wanted to present this just as an information item today to give you a background. I'm going to back up, and some of you may be familiar with this, but I'm going to go through a little bit of the background of kind of how we got to where we are today and what we see that relationship being going forward. The American Indian Cultural Center was started in 1994. The concept was started in 1994, and the goal really was to recognize and honor the culture and heritage of the 39 tribes, American Indian tribes, that are in Oklahoma, but also to promote economic development within the state and promote tourism within the state and within the city. And so that was the idea, and it was started with the establishment of the Native American Cultural and Educational Authority. And I'll tell you this, too, that as we go through this, there's a lot of acronyms in this presentation, so if I forget to explain what one of them is, please call it out, and I'll make sure that I explain what that is. There's several organizations that are involved in this. The Native American Cultural and Educational Authority is actually a state agency that was established with the original intent that it would provide for the construction and the operations of the American Indian Cultural Center. In 2003, NACEA actually contracted for an economic impact study that would estimate what the impact on taxes, local and state taxes, would be. That was contracted with Applied Economics, and it was updated in 2009, and it estimated $8.9 million in local taxes, and that was all taxes for all taxing jurisdictions, would be generated annually as a result of the American Indian Cultural Center and the development around the cultural center that was envisioned with the original plans. It also estimated an additional $7.5 million in taxes that are generated for the state. Since the beginning of this project, the state has issued $63 million in bonds for the construction of the facility, and you can see it out at I-35 and I-40. You see the facility that's sitting out there. It's been out there since 2012, and that's because the funds were exhausted in 2012 to continue the construction. There were several efforts that were led by NACEA to get additional funding through the state. As a part of those efforts, the state, or the NACEA, actually came to the city and approached the city for additional contributions from the city that would help to support a continuation of the construction and to encourage the state to step in and issue additional bonds. In 2012, the city did agree to do that and issued a resolution that said with the state's participation that the city would be willing to put an additional $9 million into the project to help with the construction. So since 2012, even though the city's committed to that, the state up to that point had not been able to get approval of issuing additional bonds, so no additional construction funding had been provided. In 2015, the state came forward with House Bill 2237, and in that bill, It had several stipulations within that that would bring forward additional state money. It recognized the city money that had been committed back in 2012. It also recognized some private funding that would be raised by the American Indian Cultural Center Foundation. We'll talk a little bit about that organization here in a minute and some of their involvement here. And in that process, the city would agree to take over operations and maintenance of the facility, and the state would transfer the commercial property or the undeveloped property that's surrounding the American Indian Cultural Center to the city. Part of this was that the state and the city also had to enter into an agreement. So this was approved in May of 2015, right at the end of the legislative session, that the city and the state had to enter into an agreement. At first it was by January of 2005, and then later extended to 2015, and then extended to March of 2015 to allow us to enter an agreement with the Office of Management Enterprise Services that would basically commit to the requirements of House Bill 2237. And so that was accomplished actually on March 15, 2015, where the city and the state entered into an agreement. And because it involved a real estate purchase where we were actually involved in receiving the property that's the commercial property around the cultural center, that had a closing date. So we have an agreement that was established, but we had to enter into get to a closing. Part of the closing requirements was that we get clear title on that commercial property for development of that property, and that we're able to successfully get into an agreement with the Chickasaw Nation. And so as we went through our due diligence study, we looked at operations costs, potential operations costs, and brought in a consultant to evaluate that, the operations of the museum. We had a consultant that came in and evaluated the completion cost to get the construction completed on the facility, as well as economic development potential for the land around the facility. And we were moving towards actually stepping back from the project, that the city was looking at it and going, I don't think we can move forward with this on our own. And at that same time, the Chickasaw Nation stepped forward and offered to bring additional funding to help with supporting the construction of the project, as well as the initial operations of the project, including the pre-opening costs. With that additional partnership with the Chickasaw Nation, the council stepped back and looked at it again and said, you know, we believe we can move forward with this, make it a successful project with this agreement and with this partnership with the Chickasaw Nation. The agreement that we entered into with OMES it set forward all the requirements, or it established those requirements that were in House Bill 2237, and agreed that the completion cost for the facility would be $65 million. Now, estimates of the completion on that facility are in excess of $65 million, but we set that completion cost at $65 million in our agreement because of the fact that that was the funding that had been identified to that point. So we aren't limited to $65 million for completion, but we set that as a level based on the funding that was available. And the funding is outlined here, where the state issues $25 million in bonds. The American Indian Cultural Center Foundation raises $31 million in donations, and then the city commits to $9 million, and so that gets to our $65 million in the completion. If additional funds can be raised, and the Cultural Center Foundation is working to raise additional funds above the $31 million commitment in order to try to be able to finish the project as it was originally designed. And so that's something that is in the works, but that was included in that OMES agreement. One of our stipulations was we had to be able to enter that agreement and to get a satisfactory agreement, both with the clear title of the land around the American Indian Cultural Center and for that future operation support. With the Chickasaw Nation. The Chickasaw Nation established the AICCM Land Development LLC. And so it's a separate entity of the Chickasaw Nation. And one of the things it does for us, and it does both for us and for the Chickasaw Nation, is it eliminates issues of sovereignty. And so they do that with a lot of their business transactions, is they'll establish LLCs that are established under state law. And so that's what they've created, is the AICCM Land Development Company. And the agreement with the Land Development Company did establish, reestablish that $65 million is a target level for that completion cost for the facility. We also had to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the state through the NACEA, through OMES, the city, the Chickasaw Nation, all entered into an MOU to agree that the city and the Chickasaw Nation, and it's the Chickasaw Nation through the Land Development Company, would be parties at the table while they're doing value engineering on the construction and reviewing plans for construction. And part of this was, we're all invested in this being successful going forward. We don't want to just trim down the project and take out opportunities to raise revenues within the project or take out in some important feature just to get to that $65 million. So it was everyone to be at the table together in a partnership to see this completed properly. With that agreement, and knowing that the Chickasaw Nation through the Land Development Company and the city would be parties to that value engineering and review of the construction plans, the American Indian Cultural Center Land Development Company had agreed to provide an additional $15 million to help with construction costs that are in excess, the unforeseen construction costs that would be in excess of the $65 million. They also agreed to provide $14 million for AICCM operations, and that's pre-opening operations as well as additional funding after the facility is opened. As a part of our due diligence, we hired a group called Consulticon that came in and evaluated the potential operating success of the American Indian Cultural Center, and in that evaluation, they estimated that just with the revenues generated by the center, that there would be a subsidy or a shortfall between revenues and expenditures of about $1.5 to $3 million a year. And that was their estimate. And that didn't include additional fundraising. It was just for the specific operations of the facility. As we looked at that, that's one of the reasons that the Chickasaw Nation stepped forward and said they would provide $14 million that would help with the initial costs when revenues weren't being generated. And then once it's starting, as we're working towards a successful, sustainable operations plan, that they would help us to getting through that so it would relieve pressure on the city's operating funds. And the goal really ultimately also includes within that agreement that the two parties, the city and the Chickasaw Nation, would work together through a task force to develop a sustainable operations plan for the future through fundraising with the foundation that would bring other parties to the table that would help cover that gap between what the facility can actually generate in revenues and the expenses that will be required to successfully operate it. So the partnership for the path forward now, the American Indian Cultural Center Foundation has raised $20 million, so they have $20 million in hand. They have additional contributions that have been committed to. They're confident we're going to be able to get to the $31 million that was committed, and they're working to raise additional funds beyond that. Right now they're focused on the capital campaign, but they also have within their sights the goal of raising funds to be able to help support in other partnerships to help support the operations going forward. The next steps are the state will issue their $25 million in bonds for construction. The plans are continuing to be updated now, and construction is expected to begin once the bonds have been sold. The closing on the agreement with OMES is scheduled, or it's not scheduled yet, but right now the goal is by the end of this calendar year to have that closing completed. We'd like to do it before the end of the calendar year, but at least by the end of the calendar year. Right after that, we'll take possession of the property, that commercial property that surrounds the American Indian Cultural Center, and the closing then will take place with the Land Development Company, which would then transfer the ownership of that property to the Land Development Company, and they would take responsibility for doing the commercial development around the American Indian Cultural Center. And the commitment is it would be development that would be consistent with the character and the purpose of the American Indian Cultural Center. And so with those goals in mind then, the city will provide our $9 million within 12 months from the beginning of the construction, the re-beginning of the construction on the facility. And then the council, that kind of leads us to where we are today. The council has requested that the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust step into that role of managing the contract for operations of the facility. Within our agreement with the Land Development Company, it names the American Indian Cultural Center Foundation as the operator, just similar to what we have with the Miri Gardens Foundation, that they will be the operator of the facility. They've hired an executive director to manage the facility and be involved as we're working towards the completion of the facility and giving advice as we're making decisions about changes within the plans on the facility. And so that's all been set in place. There is a budget that's out there now, and there's a budget that's required before the opening as they're participating in the development of not just the development and the construction, but also in the development of all of the exhibits and just planning of the story within the facility. And so there will be a budget that will be coming forward soon. Within the agreement with the land development company, there's a requirement for a finance committee. There'll be representatives, 2 representatives from the city, 2 representatives from the American Indian Cultural Center Foundation, and then 2 representatives from the Chickasaw Nation through the land development company. They will review the budgets that are submitted. That will authorize draws upon the $14 million that's going to be made available through the land development company that would be available to be able to provide for the operations and pre-opening costs and operations then of the facility. So I just wanted to bring that forward to you. Before we have that agreement, we're still in the process of working on those closing and getting the title work completed on the closing agreements, both with OMES and with the land development company. And we'll also be working on that operations agreement that will come back to you at a later time for your approval. Our goal, again, will be to shortly after those closings are completed that we'll be able to bring an operations agreement back to you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Craig. Questions for Craig? Yes, ma'am.
Look this way. A couple of questions. Relative to the anticipated operational cost, I know it's still very much estimated, and how many acres are in the commercial land area for development?
I do not remember the answer to that. Do you know that, John? Okay. And right now, Regina just put the map up. The plan right now within this is everything. Eastern is the street that's kind of going through the property there in the middle, and then I-35 is on the left-hand side. The property that's directly surrounding between I-35 and Eastern is the property that they're going to take for the commercial development, as well as that property that's north of the river. So the plan right now is there's a reserve on portions of the land that are east of Eastern that they would have an option for that, but right now it's to take that property there and develop the property that's there in the center.
Operational cost?
So the estimate on the operational cost, I believe the total operational cost, and they gave us a low to high operational cost, and interestingly enough, the higher the operational cost, and the assumption is you're putting those operations into revenue generating potential. I think it was about $8 million. I don't have the numbers right in front of me right now, but I believe it was around $8 million was that estimate. And on that high end was actually the one that had the lower subsidy requirement because you have more revenue generation potential.
I do have a question. Thank you. That is perhaps the most succinct, clear explanation of where we've been for 20 years and where we're headed, so thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I've had a lot of people help me in reviewing this to make sure we got it right.
Well, we had an earlier item where it said, "Two yet many." This may be It Takes a Village, LLC or something. But however you got to where you are, I appreciate that you understand. A lot of moving parts. Thankful to see progress. To build off of Rhonda's question, you say development consistent with the area, but is it still subject to city planning, permitting?
Absolutely.
Okay, what about the Riverfront Authority? Does it extend to that area such that there could be some consistent opinions offered from that city trust?
Yeah, so the answer from Wiley is no, it does not. But the idea would be it wouldn't be something that would be in conflict. You know, there'd be something complementary. It could be office space, too. I mean, they have that as long as it's complementing the purpose of the facility.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's obviously so many parcels with arterials and all sorts of interesting things. I'm
right. There are a lot of challenges.
Struggling to see
property.
a consistent application across all of those widgets. But
right.
I hope that happens.
The title commitment revealed over 200 title exceptions to that, just the commercial property.
Now the
Wiley, I was in Wiley's office when he opened some of this, a portion of that title work up, and he said, "I've never seen anything like this." So it's very, very complicated, certainly.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the general manager's reports.
I don't think I really have much else to add. I think you've heard a lot from all of us today.
We have. We're in information overload.
Yeah.
Okay, that being said, any comments from staff? Seeing none. Any comments from the trustees? Thank you all for your involvement and your investment of time today. Any citizens wishing to be heard? Seeing none, we are adjourned.